Hello, everybody. This is Frank at Iron Age News, South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Thursday, May 21st, 11 a.m. And as you know, sailors are fighting on the dance floor, and the lawman is beating up the wrong guy because we are talking about life on Mars and what Elon Musk intends to do with your hard-earned dollars. So he's not alone. And you'll see this also in a couple of other businesses, which we'll do the same thing with later on. Today, these silicone millionaires, billionaires, possible zillionaires, venture capitalists, government defense contractors are determined to answer that question. Is there life on Mars? But we're going to ask a different question, not if there is life, is there a return on Mars? For all of you wily investors out there, because somewhere between the rockets and the memes, the lifestyle, the live stream launches, and the mythology of becoming a multi-planetary species, something very strange has happened. Mars stopped being a science project and became a financial narrative. This is not an anti-science episode. We are not flat earthers. There is not an anti-technology theme going through this. Exploration is good. Innovation is necessary. Engineering breakthroughs matter and happen a lot of times through great feats of engineering and scientific strength. But smart investors have to separate inspiration from valuation. And when you look carefully at the economics behind the Mars narrative, things start to get a little uncomfortable because the deeper question may not be whether humanity can reach Mars. The deeper question may be what exactly is being built here on Earth while everyone is looking up at the sky. Now, let's get into this issue of this. Sorry, a little sick today. One of the biggest mistakes people make is comparing Mars colonization to something that's tangible, like the westward expansion of the United States or the exploration of the New World or things like that. It sounds like it's it's a good analogy. It's romantic. We got pioneers, we got adventure, things of that nature, manifest destiny. But historically, the American frontier, especially, had immediate economic utility, as did the New World. There was farmland, rivers, timber, gold. We built rail corridors. We strung telegraph lines. A lot of money was generated, and a lot of people were lifted up from poverty by working. People could move west and almost immediately begin generating a productive economic value. Mars is the exact opposite of that. Mars is not a frontier. Mars is an environmental death trap. Everything required for human survival, if humans were actually to go there, must either be transported from Earth or manufactured in an environment fundamentally hostile to human existence, be it the moon or Mars or Uranus. So, food, medicine, oxygen, construction materials, electronics, fuel, radiation shielding, water purification, the ability to generate water in an oxygen-free environment. Even the dust is toxic. This is not Kansas with rockets. This is an Antarctic research station multiplied by 1,000 and placed 140 million miles away. And unlike the American frontier, Mars settlers would not become independent. They would become permanently dependent. They are dependent on the launch systems. They are dependent on the communications, centralized supply chains, a very communistic center, but run by maybe one or two highly well-placed people, right? That's not decentralized. That's called managed dependency. That's kind of what Los Angeles has been shooting for and California in general. And the moon, they're going to bring up the Apollo landing all the time. Apollo wasn't an economic colonization project either. And I remember the Apollo landing. That'll tell you. I even had the spacesuit because I was hip. You had to go all the way out to Reading to get it. Apollo was geopolitical theater. It was the Cold War. Sputnik went up, so we had to go to the moon. We had to one up the Ruskies, right? We had to show that the nation of the United States was able to throw money and brains at something and in a short period of time get things done. So once America planted the flag and beat the Soviets psychologically, that's kind of it. And why? Because there was no economic engine under it. There was nothing to be gained from it. We had the dust, we had the rocks, we had Buzz Aldrin, you had things like that, and that was the end of it. Thus endeth the lesson. And that lesson matters more importantly now with Mars than with anything else. If America lost interest in the moon after achieving one of the greatest technological feats in human history, why should investors assume Mars suddenly becomes economically self-sustaining, especially when Mars is exponentially harder? And I'm not, once again, we're not down in the fantasy, it's interesting to an extent, but it affects us more importantly. And this is where it becomes more interesting for you and I if you're even investing $1 in the market, because Mars itself may not actually be the main story. The infrastructure surrounding the Mars mission may be the real prize. And you have to do it this way. Think about what is getting built under the under the justification of making humanity multiplanetary. All the launch systems, the satellites, the AI, the global communications, autonomous robotics, and energy infrastructure. That's not just a space program. That is a civilizational scale industrial ecosystem. Think about all that is involved in having a dependent world, and that's where you are. And historically, governments have often subsidized industries for strategic reasons while hoping economic benefits eventually spill over into civilian life. We ended up with silly putty because of the atomic bomb. That was a well thought out trade, but sometimes it does work out where we got semiconductors, the GPS system, a lot of aerospace technology, the DARPA network, for better or worse. And history also shows another pattern, which is governments can accidentally create massive systems where the public absorbs the risk, the taxpayers subsidize the infrastructure, and private entities accumulate extraordinary power and leverage. I'm going to go with number 3. Once a company becomes deeply embedded in national infrastructure, ordinary market discipline weakens. At that point, political necessity, defense concerns, and employment dependence and strategic fear begin replacing normal economic accountability. And that's where the modern Mars narrative becomes difficult to separate from out of control defense contractors or communications dominance or AI concentration. Mars becomes the justification engine. All things lead to Mars, right? But the actual accumulation of power happens here on Earth. There's another layer to all this that investors need to understand. And by the way, I have to disclaim, I am not a licensed whatever you have to do to be an investor, but as a private investor myself, these things bother me. And as an American citizen, these things bother me. And it's being billed as an entirely different thing than it actually is. There's another layer here to all this that the investors need to understand, and that is modern billionaire industrialists increasingly present themselves not simply as businessmen, but as architects of civilization itself. You have to listen to the language, right? Saving humanity, ensuring species survival, building the future, making humanity multiplanetary. These are not ordinary corporate slogans. These are ideological narratives. These are etched in stone over the doorways of these guys' houses. And those narratives are extraordinarily powerful because they elevate private actors into an almost mythological role. Okay. If you want to know a little bit about architecture and power, kings built cathedrals, right? Empires built pyramids. Nations build moonshots. Today's technocratic elite builds orbital systems. They build AI infrastructure, which we have a question on that as well, satellite grids, and planetary narratives. The mythology itself becomes politically useful because critics can now be framed as, I would say, you're a Luddite, right? You're probably a Luddite or a neo-Luddite, and you're anti-progress and you're anti-science, and you will not embrace the sweet caress of the machine, and you lack vision, and you're probably a Nazi, right? Meanwhile, underneath the mythology, the investors who are going to be participating in something far less romantic a long duration infrastructure consolidation project with no, okay, with unclear economic returns. They can only game the system as they've been gaming it to a certain number. And after you hit another number, it becomes unwieldy and it will be found out, but it will theoretically, the game is to keep it alive because to crash it would crash the planet. Yep. And there's another uncomfortable reality. The timelines involved here are not normal investment timelines. This is not a quarter, it's not a year, it's decades, it's generational. They're tying you into generational wealth removal from you, meaning the average investor may never see a direct measurable return from Mars itself. They will not see it. Okay. Only the valuation cycles driven by the narrative or the hype or the strategic indispensability will be there. All right. So at some point, smart investors are going to have to ask, where is the actual cash flow? Not the dream, not the lifestyle, not that green girl, not the mythology, the business model. What the hell is this business model built on? What exactly is being monetized? Because Mars itself currently offers no viable extraction economy. We cannot go to Mars. We cannot dig up a gigantic pile of diamonds or platinum or whatever it is that we were saying that's out there that we should have. We cannot do it. We cannot bring it here and we cannot land it here safely. Okay. So there is no realistic near-term return profile. There is no industrial self-sufficiency. So what does have value? What's going to have the value? And they're going to tell you it's the Earth-based infrastructure, the launch contracts, the satellite systems, the communications, the AI convergence again, which leads to an uncomfortable possibility. Mars may not be the product. Mars may be the story. And if you're funding the story without receiving proportional ownership in the infrastructure actually being built around it, then from a financial standpoint, you are not a customer, you are fuel. So let's be fair. Human exploration always carried risks. There's always been big dreams, greater civilization, blah, 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 blah. There's no question that space technology creates real scientific engineering advantages. However, investors and US citizens as well, I'll throw you all in together because you cannot allow the government to finance it and just turn this to a taxpayer funded safari or fantasy jerk off festival, which it will become only as far as it needs to suck that huge amount of money out of the investment pool for the United States. It will do to us what the carbon credit trade shit was supposed to do to the rest of the world. It will retard growth in the United States. It will retard all types of businesses from developing, and it will keep you as a citizen at the lower end of whatever economic peg you wanted to be involved in, unless you are working for that infrastructure project. And if you are, there will be no other game in town for which to work. So I would say the real battle right now is not happening on Mars, it's happening here on Earth. And it's going to be over this infrastructure shit and the capital and the communication and who controls the systems of the future. So is there life on Mars? Maybe. But a smart investor and a smart citizen of the United States that can vote, the better opportunities may still be right here at home. So that's all we have for now. Like, subscribe, whatever. You have all the sites that we're on. You're watching them right now. And any questions, any particular topics you'd like us to cover, send them in, send in the requests. We always do requests if possible. Nothing crazy and nothing that the Jews did at all. And that's usually that's our bar to meet. So that's about it. Talk to you later on. Bye.